it about the perimenopause that actually has an impact on sleep? Definitely, there's the impact of the changes in estrogen and progesterone. So we know that our estrogen and progesterone are declining, but also, as I'm sure you're aware in all of your work, that actually there's these real spikes and dips and peaks in the progesterone and estrogen in the perimenopause. And these kind of turbulent sort of patterns of estrogen, which is generally declining, seems to be the cause for a lot of the disruption in our mental health, in our vasomotor symptoms like the hot flushes, but also in our sleep. So we find that there's this big kind of multifactorial process that happens. So the change in our hormones is massive in terms of triggering sleep, but actually there's a whole load of other stuff that also happens, which is really important when we're thinking about sleep. So we know that the hot flushes and the vasomotor symptoms are really thought to be quite responsible for the early morning wakenings. So the 3 and 4 o'clock wakenings, we think that the majority of these are to do with a change in our body temperature. We also know that for women, the anxiety peaks during this period. And if anyone has struggled also in the lead up to this period with anxiety and depression, that can have a real kind of relationship with that. So it can really interact with it and it can really hike up the anxiety levels. We also know that when we get into that, the perimenopause and postmenopause, we're more likely to have these other sleep symptoms and other sleep disorders. And 2 of the most common ones that we tend to see a lot of, and especially at my work in guys, we get sleep apnea. So for women, this hikes up during this period where we have sleep disordered breathing, and also restless leg syndrome. And restless leg syndrome and sleep apnea are both responsible for disrupting sleep. So even if we're not aware of it, what can happen is we can kind of have these peaks of where our restless legs might disturb us, and it will disrupt our sleep enough to wake us up, and then we really struggle to get back to sleep. I would say that the other thing that we see, and this is across the board, not just in the perimenopause, but generally, is that insomnia can become habitual. So I always say to my patients that although there's something that might be triggering your insomnia, it's not necessarily the same thing that's keeping it going. And so actually, we might have a drop in our estrogen, which might create this trigger for insomnia, but actually, in terms of what keeps it going, that can be behavioral changes, that can be stuff that we do differently, that can be kind of not going out and seeing our friends as much, that can be our exercise dropping, that can be a whole load of different behaviors around sleep that can also keep it going. And then, of course, there's the other kind of mental health side to it as well. So the impact of aging, all of that kind of identity issues, thinking about our usefulness and are we able to cope with the changes that we see in terms of brain fog and fatigue, and that can have a real impact as well in terms of sleep.